Reconciliation, students, faculty, staff, celebration, sharing, discussion, teaching, learning.
Thank you, Patrick. Now I would like to invite Dr. Bernard Rousseau, Dean of the Doisy College of Health Sciences, to the stage for opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for SLU's 14th Annual Athletic Training Speaker Series. Tonight's event is hosted by our program in athletic training, a program in the Department of Physical Therapy and athletic training here in our Doisy College of Health Sciences. The AT Speaker Series is a wonderful annual event. In addition to our invited speaker, that the program also includes induction of eligible students into the National Athletic Training Honor Society and the recognition of recipients of athletic training scholarships. So tonight we recognize recipients of the Brandy Burgett Memorial Award and Scholarship in Athletic Training, which honors the memory of Brandy, an alumnus of the SLU AT program. The scholarship recognizes students who display exceptional courage, determination, and passion for the AT profession in Brandy's memory. Each year, we recognize Bob and Marnie Burgett, Brandy's parents, for their generous gifts in establishing the Memorial Scholarship. I understand that they are joining us virtually, so please join me in welcoming the Burgett family and thanking them for their support. We also recognize recipients of the Bowman Endowed Scholarship to commemorate Clarence Bob Bowman, a model for aspiring ATs and a pillar in our community, who took care of SLU and St. Louis Cardinals athletes for over 50 years and earned a spot in both the National Athletic Trainers Association and the SLU Athletic Hall of Fame. The scholarship recognizes outstanding athletic training students entering the second professional year. I also wish to thank our alumni, our preceptors, and members of the local sports medicine community, and welcome our faculty and students for joining us this evening. At this time, I would also like to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Zachary Winkleman from the University of South Carolina, who will be providing us with considerations in mental health best practices for student athletes and in the creation of healthy environments that support mental health and promote well-being. And finally, I'd like to thank the members of our distinguished panel and our moderator, Tim Howell, for their participation this evening and for sharing their expertise with us tonight. So I'll end with a great big thank you for all those involved in planning and supporting tonight's event. I look forward to our time together and hope that we can continue to engage in these important conversations around the role that ATs play in supporting student athletes and their mental health and overall well-being. Thank you and hope you enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Dean Rousseau. We'll now move into the recognition ceremony portions of our program. We'll begin with the Iota Tau Alpha recognition ceremony that celebrates the academic achievements of our students. Members of Iota Tau Alpha are those that have completed at least 3 semesters in the athletic training program and at least 3 athletic training specific courses while maintaining a 3.5 GPA. Due to curricular changes in our program recently, the membership criteria for Iota Tau Alpha has evolved such that the timing has shifted, and therefore we do not have any new inductees this year. We determined that everyone that would have qualified under the new criteria has in fact already been inducted under the previous. However, we would still like to recognize the academic achievements of our current Iota Tau Alpha members. So I'd like to invite the Iota Tau Alpha leadership team up to the stage, and please join me in welcoming our ITA President, Jeremy Grease, ITA Vice President, Caroline Donlinger, and ITA Secretary, Mary Gogola.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. As Katie mentioned, instead of initiating new members, we're going to recognize and honor the contributions of our past and current members of Iota Tau Alpha. This includes current students and alumni who have upheld the values and ideas of our society.
The Honorary Society of Iota Tau Alpha was founded at Troy University in the year 2004 by John H. Anderson, Program Director of Athletic Training Education. The objective of Iota Tau Alpha is to foster a high standard of ethics and professional practices and to create a spirit of loyalty and fellowship, particularly around students of athletic training education. The Greek letters which represent our names were chosen because they represent the summation of the initial letters of the founding society.
The Iota Tau Alpha Society has been established to recognize and honor those individuals in the field of athletic training education who have, through scholarship, integrity, and outstanding achievement, been a credit to their profession. Tonight, we are proud to acknowledge the contribution of all of our members who exemplify these ideals. Current ITA student members, as I call your name, we invite you to make your way to the stage as you are able to and be recognized. Audience members, please hold your applause until all ITA members are on stage. Tori Connolly, Caroline Donlinger, Jeremy Grease, Mary Gogola, Olivia Hiscox, and Morgan Laundrie. Now we would like to invite all ITA members in attendance to make your way to the stage as you are able.
There any? I think there's a couple in the back there. Come on down.
On behalf of Iota Tau Alpha, we extend our deepest gratitude to all our members for their dedication and commitment to the field of athletic training. Your achievements and contributions continue to inspire us and uphold the mission of our society. Please join me in recognizing all the members of Iota Tau Alpha.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right, now we will recognize those students who have been awarded one of St. Louis University's athletic training scholarships. Introducing the Brandy Burgett Memorial Award and Scholarship in Athletic Training is Dr. Anthony Breitbach, Director of Interprofessional Education and past Director of the SLU Athletic Training Program.
Thank you very much, Katie, and congratulations to our Iota Tau Alpha members. And it is my pleasure to be a part of the 14th annual speaker series, remembering the first. But I would like to take a few moments to remember Brandy Burgett, a 2017 Master of Athletic Training graduate who passed away on December 13th, 2017. Brandy came to us as a freshman in 2011 from Chaparral High School in Temecula, California. Despite struggling with the pain and the other symptoms of Crohn's disease, she brought a passion for life and love for SLU and the athletic training profession every day. We will all keep her memory in our minds and hearts. She is a daughter of St. Louis University forever. Her legacy lives on through the SLU Athletic Training Program's Brandy Burgett Memorial Award and Scholarship. It was established through the generosity of her parents, Bob and Marnie Burgett, to recognize SLU AT students who approach our profession with the same passion and strength shown by Brandy in her time at SLU. Bob and Marnie are listening. They cannot come on, but they are listening right now, and they would like to recognize the 2025 Master of Athletic Training graduates who have received the Brandy Burgett Memorial Award and Scholarship: Olivia Hiscox and Madison Rayberg.
Thank you, Dr. Breitbach, and congratulations, Olivia and Madison. Also, thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Burgett for tuning in tonight and for your continued support of athletic training education at SLU. The athletic training program would also like to extend an invitation to all of you to join us in our effort to preserve Brandy's legacy by growing the Brandy Burgett Memorial Award and Scholarship. We hope you can join us for an upcoming fundraiser at Topgolf Midtown on Sunday, March 30th from 1 to 3 p.m. for an afternoon of golf, refreshments, and community. Through hosting this event, we hope to bring awareness to Crohn's disease and have set a goal of endowing the scholarship to ensure that we can continue to support future generations of athletic training students at SLU. Registration is now open with multiple registration tiers available. You can access the registration page through this QR code, the link provided in the chat, or through any of our social media platforms, or by reaching out to SLU PTAT at health.slu.edu. If you did that registration, like I asked, you will also receive all this information via email. If you're unable to attend, you can still make a gift to the scholarship by scanning yet another QR code, using the link provided in the chat, or similarly reaching out to us at sluptat at health.slu.edu. Sponsorship opportunities are also available. Please contact Catherine Dortch if you are interested in those opportunities. We hope you can join us. It is my honor to introduce the Clarence Bob Bowman Endowed Scholarship in Athletic Training. This award commemorates the legacy of Bob Bowman as a model for aspiring athletic trainers with a tremendous positive influence in his community. Bowman has an extensive career as an athletic trainer, providing athletic training services to our community's collegiate and professional athletes. His services have been recognized with his induction to both the National Athletic Trainers Association and SLU Halls of Fame. The Bowman Scholarship recognizes a second-year athletic training student who exemplifies the same dedication to athletic training as Bob Bowman. Please join me in congratulating this year's recipient of the Bowman Endowed Scholarship in Athletic Training, Jeremy Grease. And now for the main event. As we move into the keynote presentation of the 14th Annual Athletic Training Speaker Series, I will offer a reminder. If you have not yet completed the registration, please do so. This helps us track attendance of the event, but also allows us to deliver CEUs for those of you that are seeking CEUs as athletic trainers or physical therapists. Your CEU certificates will be sent electronically after completing the post-event survey. I would like to again invite Jeremy Grease up to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Zachary Winkleman.
Dr. Zachary Winkleman is a clinical assistant professor in the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina. Currently, Zachary is the director of clinical education for the post-professional athletic training program. He earned his bachelor's degree from Texas Lutheran University in 2013, his master's degree from Indiana State University in 2015, and his PhD in curriculum and instruction program with a concentration in athletic training education from Indiana State in 2019. Dr. Zach Winkleman is a certified athletic trainer and researcher with 137 peer-reviewed publications and several national and international presentations focused on telemedicine, simulation-based learning, patient-centered care, and mental health.
Thank you all. I appreciate the introduction. Let me get set up here. So thank you first so much to SLU and Dr. Sniffen for inviting me to come to the speaker series today. Had a very enjoyable day on campus meeting with different people from your department and from the college interprofessional education office. And so just first, I just want to say how great of a warm welcome I've had from everyone here. So thank you for that. I'm excited to talk to you today about a checklist approach to supporting mental health best practices. Just as a full disclaimer, and as Jeremy introduced, I am an athletic trainer. My background is in athletic training. And so what I'm going to speak to you today is from the lens of mental health from our perspective as the athletic trainer. Licensed mental health care providers have a role in this, and no way, and what I'm trying to speak today is to suggest that we are a replacement. We are a supportive, collaborative team. And so I just want to start off our presentation kind of thinking about that approach and working from this from a collaborative standpoint. There we go. All right. So as Jeremy shared, I am at University of South Carolina currently. The director of our clinical education program for our graduate assistant athletic trainers, where I oversee 31 of our graduate assistants that work out in the community. As part of that, I have a lot of interactions with young clinicians trying to navigate what this looks like in terms of their space. In addition to that, I also teach within our professional athletic training program, and I teach our mental and behavioral health content for our program. So our learning objectives for today are we're going to explore the mental health best practices, looking at what that looks like from both collegiate and secondary school lenses. We'll talk about some strategies that you can use to apply this in terms of athletic identity, self-concept, and transition challenges. And finally, as I had a chance to meet with some of the students prior and leading up to this presentation, we also want to hit home about what this looks like in terms of the lens of NIL and how we can support and maintain mental well-being with that approach. I'm probably going to walk around just as a heads up if everyone's okay with that. I don't like to, podiums aren't my thing really. So when we think about mental health, everyone in this room here currently has mental health. And I think that's a really important reminder for us that as we approach this, mental health is not a negative thing. when I teach this to my students, we often turn on our mental health voice is what I call it, where we start talking softer and a little bit slower, and we try to sound more empathetic. And in doing so, we create this entire identity that is about mental health, when in reality, everybody has it. And it is okay to have good days, and it's okay to not have such good days. But when we start thinking about mental wellness and mental health challenges, 1 in 5 US adults have been diagnosed with a mental health condition. Those are things like depression, anxiety, eating disorders, some of the other concepts we're going to talk about. Regardless if you have that condition or not, we all have mental health, and we can work towards how we can best support that and creating an environment that supports that. So what does mental health look like from our area in athletic training? One of the biggest things is preventative screening. So looking to identify what areas or concepts individuals may have coming into a season, at the end of a season, transitions in their sport, and looking at ways that we can start to explore what preventatively we can do in terms of making referrals. As the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted for all of us, mental health has had a serious impact on our way of connecting and creating relationships with people, highlighted through the pandemic as we remove some of those relationships with individuals. So we saw things like anxiety, depression, hopelessness start to rise. In addition, from our healthcare standpoint, we always have seen documented well in the literature about stress and exhaustion. This idea here that there's sometimes where you have good stress, our eustress, where we need to feel challenged and creative in our workplace, and we're being pushed. And that often leads to areas that when not feeling supported and our work demands are heightened, that we start to see things like role overload or role strain, where we kind of forget what our actual role is and how we're supposed to best navigate that together. That then leads into things like exhaustion, fatigue, compassion fatigue, where you start to care so much about your patients that you forget to care about yourself, leading then into burnout, which in our athletic training literature has been well described as an area of concern for our profession, which is also well described in a lot of other healthcare professions, dentistry, medicine, where we start to see burnout of healthcare providers in that area being a concern of how long of a career do we have. I say all that to bring in this aspect that as we start to care for other people, we forget sometimes to care for ourselves. So everybody find some time to build in your own self-care as we go about this, navigating this conversation for our patients. And as we look at areas that we see within mental health, it has seemed to be more of a growing issue in sport specifically. Now, I don't want to say that it hasn't been there. It just maybe we're talking about it more, and that it's becoming more of the forefront about what challenges people may be experiencing while participating in sport. As part of that, when we talk about what sport looks like, oftentimes individuals, specifically professional elite or collegiate athletes, start to identify themselves as their sport. And this is a concept called athlete identity. So a person really starts to identify that the role of who they are is directly connected to that sport. They define themselves by their individual roles, and they see themselves as a piece of that puzzle there. We're going to come back to this concept a little bit later on, but I wanted to hit home why when we talk about mental health, specifically in sport, we start to see some of these challenges start to emerge. So some of the data here and for mental health, specifically in sports, often looks different depending on what data set you look at. If it's NCAA, Division I, Division II, professional sports, we start to see this to be an area where those numbers try to navigate a little bit. Specifically on the screen here, we can see that about 12 to 15% of college student athletes have been diagnosed with anxiety or at risk for being, has the risk factors for anxiety. Depression rates are similar, about 13 to 33%. And we have very little data on mental health challenges of high school student athletes. And so if there's an area that people want to explore more or dive into more, most of the data that we have on high school students is specifically on just being a high school student, not what it looks like participating in sports plus being a high school student. That data, though, is higher, with about 30% of secondary school students being diagnosed with anxiety, and those numbers transitioning into college still at the 15% or so. We also see eating disorders to be an area of heightened concern, especially within sports. About a fourth of college student athletes have struggled with disordered eating or eating disorder. And oftentimes when we talk about this, the data is predominantly in our female or women population. And we also need to explore that there's areas of eating disorder and feeding conditions that are impacting our male athletes at the same rates. And so some of this data here is also highlighting that these are probably the 3 most common conditions as an athletic trainer that I've seen in my career: anxiety, depression, and eating disorders. But I also want to note that suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death in college student athletes. And if that doesn't have you have a moment of that's concerning, that we need to start focusing a little bit more attention to this, that I think we need to see mental health as a space that we have work to do, and we need to be impacting our student athletes as much. We did some research on this topic in this area, and we interviewed ATs about their experiences managing and handling the death of a student athlete. So we interviewed people that had lost a patient due to suicide that was one of their student athletes. And the stories were remarkable, and we really appreciated all the people that took the time to share those. But the biggest thing that we identified was kind of from 2 different angles that matched up together. There really wasn't a plan in place of what happens after, and I didn't take any time off from my work. People returned to work the next day, if not the same day. Oftentimes didn't set up counseling appointments, and struggled to find a way to find someone to talk to outside of their partner or a spouse or somebody at home. So finding the help for athletic trainers is just as critical as we're finding the time to help our patients in this area too. So this data on the screen in the image is also from the NCAA. This is on reasons why a person is considering transferring. The #1 reason for female and male sports was because of mental health concerns. And so this is data from 2021. A lot of the NCAA data, they don't repeat the same studies every year. But this was a conversation starter about how much do we have these individuals that are being impacted by mental health, and why is this the reason they're leaving our campuses? That spearheaded a lot of conversations around mental health, specifically within NCAA organizations, about how are we best helping people. I also want to note a couple of others on here: conflict with coaches, academics, financial concerns. As we talk about some of these others, topics like NIL, as we move forward, we have to start seeing if there's an intersection between some of these topics here. So what is our role? So when I was in school, our job for mental health was recognize and refer. That was all I was taught. That's what I was told to do. You see something wrong, send them to somebody else. And that's how I approached mental health when I first started my career. That, oh, you look like you're having a bad day? I've got a number of a friend down the hall that's in the sports psych. They can probably talk to you. I didn't ask questions. I didn't know what I was actually screening for. Didn't really know what I was actually looking for in terms of recognition. And surely I wasn't supporting them. And from that aspect, I started to identify that our role here is to identify signs and symptoms through that screening process. But to recognize something, you have to know what you're looking for. You have to identify preparatory acts or concerning behaviors that really point you into a direction that this person may need some additional help. For referral, these are my 3 C's: that it's got to be confidential in your approach. You got to figure out how to collaborate with the team that you're sending them to. And that counseling doesn't have to be a bad thing, but also shouldn't be a one-time thing. That counseling can be a process that a person can go through therapy. And it's not, I went, so I'm going to be good. And so explaining that referral often means a relationship and a connection, not a one-time visit, and then you're good to go from there. And so oftentimes when I'm making referrals for patients or students, these are the concepts and kind of approach I take there. And lastly, support. Currently in our 2020 standards for the CATIE, which is our academic kind of blueprint for athletic training, it also adds in there that we need to teach students on how to support individuals dealing with mental health conditions. And to me, that is a critical next step for us as athletic trainers. How do we take that approach in terms of wellness, maintenance, and screening? From the time that you screen a person to the time that they're actually referred, you're going to see them more often than they're seeing their licensed mental health care provider. Oftentimes we see these individuals daily, and that's what I love about our profession, is that we have direct access to all of these individuals. But in that process, we need to figure out how we can best support and maintain those strategies that they're working on in therapy, the great things that they're doing to build some self-coping and resilience strategies, and how we can create an environment that supports them in that journey. My last piece here on screening and things I want us to think about is, as you approach trying to include this in your practice, please don't screen if you don't have a plan. What I mean by that is, I've seen so many athletic trainers like got to start screening for mental health. They add it into their PPE checklist and they start going about it. And then they put the document and say, thank you, and tuck it away into a drawer and don't actually recognize that they have people struggling with these conditions. So if you're going to screen, my first step is actually to create a relationship with someone that you're going to refer to before you actually screen. Work through what those screening tools may need to be, work out your referral strategies, and figure out how that dynamic is going to work, then start to implement your screening tools. That way you have an actual referral pathway set up afterwards. So in athletic training, as we look through this, are other CATIE standard relevant to mental health, specifically on policy development? I love a good policy. I think policies are the way for our profession to kind of navigate and handle situations. And as that data, if we go back and look at it specifically for college and high school, 36% of college and 52% of secondary school athletic trainers lack specific procedures for emergency mental health situations. If you haven't had a chance to read the new emergency preparedness NATA position statement, it also highlights the role of having something specific to mental health in your emergency preparedness toolkit. We are trying to navigate away from calling it a mental health EAP. A small change in terminology. EAPs are about venues, a place that you're at, a thing that a place that you need to navigate. So when you think about EAPs, it's about a place, not a situation or a health condition. And so what we really need to develop is a mental health policy or a mental health pathway that you're really trying to navigate a person to, regardless of whatever venue they're in. And the reason I share this here is that as we talk about suicide being the second leading cause of death now in college athletics, we need to come up with this recognition referral pathway for our patients, figuring out the ways for it to go smoothly and for people to get help. I have had to activate several of these pathways for athletes or students of mine in the past. And I think the best thing that was there was I had something to go back to. Did I hit all the boxes correctly? Do I actually know where the nearest hospital is? Do I know where they have psychiatry at that hospital? Where I live in Columbia, we have two large hospital systems. One, you can refer a patient with behavioral health concerns, and the other, if you get taken by ambulance there, you're gonna be taken to the other hospital. And so referring someone to the right place at the right time is really critical. So knowing your pathways and your processes. So if you're not aware, NCAA came out with the mental health best practices. This document was first released in 2016. It was then revised in 2020, and the most recent update just came out in 2024. The document is expansive and has details on each of these areas. Under each of these areas, then it has a specific approach for you to kind of navigate how to do each of those. So this approach, this checklist here is, I think, the best way that if you're at a high school or a college, this is the best way to probably start the conversation about what do our mental health services look for our student athletes at our site. The first thing is creating a healthy environment that supports mental health and promoting well-being. That's the part we're going to focus on today. The other ones are procedures for identification of symptoms and disorders. A highlight of that from the new revision for 2024 was this was the first time the document actually said that your tools actually need to be validated that you're using to screen for people for mental health challenges. Previously, it said, just screen, just talk to somebody and identify what's going on. The focus now is if you're gonna screen, make sure you're using the right tools. Things like the PHQ-9, the GAD-7, using tools that have validated background measures or data to support that measure doing what it's hopefully gonna be doing. Other areas in here too about the plan and outlining a referral pathway, and then ensuring that our collaboration with licensed mental health care providers overseeing the student health care specific to mental health. So as you break down the creating the healthy environment, there's several elements that were considered in here. The first was training and supporting coaches. Now, if you've been in athletic training, we know we have kind of two mindsets of coaches. There's probably a third in there, but my experience has really been two. The really supportive coach that's like, you need a day, I take whatever time you need, can tell you're struggling. The other person's like, mental health's not real. Get over it, get back out here on the court. If that's not been your experience, I would love to chat with you more about what you have been. But from my experience, that's kind of my two kind of coaching stories that I have. The process or purpose of this now is to then train people in what that looks like. Simple things like mental health first aid and getting all of our coaches trained on how to recognize and respond to these situations is a great first approach for us to start to collaborate with our athletics department to ensure that coaches know that in the time of crisis, they know what to do. In addition, knowing who to call. Do I call the director of sports medicine? Do I call the team doctor? Do I call the AT? Who do I call when something I'm concerned about somebody else? Focusing on sleep, big aspect of our performance and recovery. And this area here is allowing us to consider that mental health, we can provide every resource possible, everything that you may need, every healthcare provider you want. But if a person's going to bed at midnight, waking up at 4 a.m. and expecting for everything to just be better, it's really not gonna work. And so figuring out a schedule for athletics, a way to focus on sleep, and encouraging sleep, not only time, but also quality. How we can best navigate that for our patients to have really good sleep health, if you will. Engaging families and prospective student athletes. When we talk about college student athletes, we often are like, they're adults, we don't have to deal with their parents, and spoiler alert, that is not the case. As you navigate those relationships, it can be different. Sometimes you have a person that's a minor, maybe they started college early. Maybe you have some parents that are very engaged and they like to come in and chat with you about things that are going on. Engaging those families and the support systems for people is critical. And so identifying who that support system is and also identifying what resources you have that create a healthy environment for people. So we think back to that data from the NCAA, one of the main reasons people are transferring is because of mental health. As the athletic trainer, that's a great way to, as prospective students come to your campus, is to show or demonstrate the ways that you're emphasizing mental health on your campus, that other people know that this may be a place that I have the resources possible. Continuous improvement. So this is your quality improvement area. I'm going to talk a little bit later on about an initiative we did at USC this past year, but always looking for ways that you can improve yourself and your team. If it's working, it's great, but it always could get better. And so what are some ways that we could take some time to look at that data and the resources that are there? And then finally, attending to the unique needs of each person. This area within creating healthy environments really does have a focus on diversity and equity, that you can't provide all the resources as a general blanket to everybody and just assume that it's gonna work. I think about this all the time when we think about mental health on college campuses, that if you think about an undergrad student versus an AT or PT student versus a law student, their lives are so different, yet we're providing one trained healthcare provider as that mental health specialist saying, I need you to talk to all the students here. And that's the role, I think, that having trained individuals within athletic departments is the key initiative that the NCAA is really hoping to achieve, that individuals embedded in athletic departments that are trained in mental health have a way to navigate differently than maybe somebody in a student health center, where they understand the demands, the time, the coaching that they may be experiencing as well. Outside of those, the two that I'm gonna focus on today are the ones with our great little images here. The first one is providing guidance or support around NIL. Just by a show of hands, if I can, for the people that are in the room, how many people feel comfortable with NIL if you needed to explain it to somebody? Okay, how many people know of NIL? Okay, great. That's just a good tempo for me as we go through here. That as an area of mental health, we're gonna talk about kind of the intersection of what that looks like. And then also we'll talk about what supporting a student through transition periods look like. Transitions in sport can look like very different things, injuries, graduation, and so we'll talk about ways that we can do that. So to prepare for the presentation, I actually chatted with two of my friends. Abby was actually a previous student of mine when I was at Indiana State, and she has navigated into working in the NIL space, and so I connected with her. And then my friend Joe, who works at University of South Carolina currently as a contracted partner with a company called Altius. So why did I chat with them? I felt it was important for me to share with my background and what I know with industry experts on NIL before I came to chat with you and make sure that I understand it correctly too. And I think the best thing that I heard from them when I chatted with them on our Zoom call was, everything changes with NIL every day. And so they're like, who knows what this will be by the time you get to St. Louis. But it was a really great conversation about their areas. So Abby works in the space of an app that allows people, specifically student athletes, to understand how to show proof of work, the legal side, and taxable income that comes with NIL. And then Joe works on the athlete-facing side. So he negotiates deals. So example, say we have a women's basketball player that wants, that is on a team, and we have a place like Dunkin' Donuts that wants said basketball player to take a picture of them holding a coffee cup. Joe negotiates those deals. And so the student athlete doesn't have to talk to the Dunkin' Donuts, they talk to Joe, and Joe navigates the deals for them. So kind of a brief introduction to what NIL is. This could be a whole session in itself, but I'm gonna try to keep it kind of brief so you understand. Name, image, and likeness is where a person has the ability to make money or profit for personal gain off of ways permitted for work. These also have to align with NCAA, state, and institutional legislation. So some things that are permitted in some states may not be permitted in others. The payments cannot be tied to performance. And this is the interesting part where, so imagine somebody signed me to have an NIL deal, but I'm really bad at baseball. Most likely no one's gonna give me their money because they don't want to have the really bad baseball player the face of their company, right? So a lot of times NIL deals are signed with people that are good at their sport. However, you can't pay them for winning a game or making a free throw. So you can't pay them when they did stuff well, but it often benefits people that are really good at their sports. This process is under the idea of this for that, or quid pro quo, that a person will be paid when they do something, like signing an autograph, maybe doing a personal appearance, social media endorsements, like posting on their Insta stories, promoting a commercial product or service, and maybe the face of their company, and also leading private lessons. They have to do something. You can't just get the money. In addition to that, they have all these names of things like partnerships. So the brand or business that they're supporting, when they are doing so, they can't wear anything that has your logo on it. So you can't have a Billiken on an NIL deal with an individual or a company, because that then is promoting the school rather than the business and the student. We also see the influx of marketing reps. I was talking to my athletic training students at our USC football in the clinic, and they're like, it is so different. We have agents and marketing reps coming in to meet with students during their treatment time now. And I was like, how does that conversation go? And they're like, well, they often care a lot more about their money versus maybe their healthcare. And so the same type of time or dedication to that looks a little bit different. And then finally, the last term that I think gets thrown around a lot with NIL that I think is a good just terminology is the term of collectives. Collectives are the group that is a pool of financial money that is often third party of the school, but associated with the school. So think of it as like donors that everyone comes together, and the group then puts all their money together, and that collective decides how they want to spend their money. So if you've ever been out of school or seen on ESPN or something like, this person got $2 million NIL deal from their school's not giving them that money, the collective is, which is how people and places have been able to like lure or promote individuals, like, come over here, we have all this money for you. It's from this kind of background here for the collective. The part that's a little scary and we're seeing as this navigates with legislation is there really is no bottom line. That number has not been set that there's like this is the cap or this is how much you can do so for NIL currently. So what does this look like? What are things that I think are on the radar or stuff to just kind of make you think a little bit? As we see on the bottom left picture, this was a recent act from the Office of Civil Rights about Title IX's impact on NIL. We often see NIL money go towards male sports specifically, and should there be a cost sharing process that happens now with female and male sports on campus. That has not been decided, just putting it out there of what's next. The one in the middle, if you have not seen, this is from the current ongoing legislation at LSU regarding Greg's recent spinal cord injury and surgery. There was a Good Morning America story about it most recently. For context, this individual had some vertigo and had some issues going on. was then referred 39 days later for a follow-up exam. And as part of that, ended up having to have surgery after they identified a brain tumor, and the person had underlying brain cancer. The surgeon in the case this is a transcript out of that legal proceeding. The surgeon in the case is being sued for negligence. And I just want to point out a piece here. I'm going to read from here. Dr. Gaynor was the surgeon in the case, and they awarded him with the Go Tigers Hero Award during halftime after this individual surgery. That led to complications. He talks with a speech impediment now and has some long-term life complications from it. So the school awarded him this, highlighted him as a hero for his efforts, and everyone viewed him in that way. And the lawsuit goes on to actually name that they assert that giving this award to the physician and sharing confidential information about his medical condition in a very public setting through their agents violated his privacy rights and further intentionally used his name, likeness, and image to make themselves appear more favorable. To sum that up for you, they're essentially saying this surgeon got an award, used this person that was a high-level captain of the LSU football team, and used his name or image to then promote his own business in doing so. That case has not been decided, so I just want to leave it at that. This just was filed in August, so it's very fresh still, and so we'll be interested to kind of see how that plays out. I like the top two pictures. It's kind of like a pro-con if you think about this. This is from the NCAA's Instagram page recently. This is a story about an Ole Miss basketball player that is using his NIL earnings for positive areas where he's able to give back to his family, attend PTA meetings, and really use his NIL deals to change their way of life. Aaliyah Boston, where I'm at USC, she was one of the highest grossing female athletes from the NIL kind of area and space. And she made a ton of money from that process. But something I think she's done really well is leverage this into a future career outside of basketball. So how have I partnered with these companies to actually move forward? And then lastly, this is a website called On3. If you're interested in college earnings or NIL and the space ever, this is a great website to learn a little bit more about stuff. So these are the top 15 current NIL earning athletes that are current student athletes. The top individual is Arch Manning, and he earns about $6.6 million as part of his NIL deals alone. He is at University of Texas football player. Number 12 is our sophomore quarterback at University of South Carolina, Lenore Sellers. He has at $3.4 million at number 12 on the list. I do want to highlight there is only one female in the top 15, which is Livy Dunn, who is a gymnast at LSU. Outside of that, everybody else is either college basketball or college football players. So outside of college, what about the high school kids? You may start to hear some of these things pop up that I'm in high school, I want to get paid. So currently this map looks from a company called Open Endorse. It's showing you the current landscape of NIL deals across the spectrum. As you can see, there's only about 5 or 6 states where NIL is prohibited, meaning it's against state legislation. All the other ones that are full green are confirmed that it is allowed in that state to do. The ones that are shaded light green or have hashes have some specific legislation built in. This made me have a moment of what's this gonna look like, right? As you start to see as this expands, it's kind of interesting to say, can you imagine a 16-year-old coming into your athletic training clinic and saying, hey, I just got my first NIL deal, right? Like that is so wild to me to just kind of process and think about. But as we start to look at this, what does the legislation actually say? So I looked up in Missouri, y'all have a pretty progressive NIL kind of law here. So to be eligible for NIL in the state of Missouri, they can start earning after they sign a letter of intent. Typically that doesn't happen till say their junior year of high school, still pretty early though, but they have to sign it. The caveat to it is they have to stay in state. So I went on a deep dive of how did this point get here to this case. So there was a football player that I guess was from the state of Missouri, and they got recruited to Oklahoma, and they didn't want him to go to Oklahoma. Mizzou wanted him to go there, and so Mizzou created this legislation with some lobbyists and lawmakers to figure out how can we get this person to stay here and not go to Oklahoma. And now we have a law. And so from this piece here, the legislation revised the state law to allow them to start earning without risking their immature status. And it's really guided or intended to keep in-state people in state for their college. So brief kind of area on NIL. We've talked about the mental health piece, and where do we start to see these things intersect or collide? So if we look at this from a SWOT analysis, our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats, some things I want us to think about from the strengths: fan engagement. If you think back to Johnny Manziel and him signing autographs and making some money off of his name, he really was setting the groundwork for NIL in his process and showing people that what am I doing not allowed when other people can do this when they become a pro. So the engagement for individuals with their fans is like none other. Individuals can go up straight up to an individual and get an autograph. They can sell it for money. The whole engagement for individuals for the fan piece looks different. From the mental health piece, we start to see this encourage brand building for individuals. Like, who am I as an athlete and what is my brand that I want to share? And then increasing or encouraging self-esteem building and development for individuals. Some opportunities from that, we see things like financial benefit. Making $6 million off of NIL deals, that sounds really great as a student athlete. Showing you empowerment and control over your life, and then professional development, this area of working with businesses and groups to get better. However, the areas I have some concern or I see some potential future challenges coming, specifically with what we may see in the athletic training clinic, is potential weaknesses. We have time, stress, and pressure that individuals are being asked to do in terms of their public appearances or their work that they're doing. We also see that as this is taxable income, it can impact your financial aid. Now, I put a big caveat there when I was preparing this. I was like, most individuals that are getting these large NIL deals typically don't need financial aid and they're on full ride scholarships. I understand that. However, if a person lands a NIL deal, there was one for a small D3 athlete, was at a small college, a D3 athlete, and he signed a deal with a local landscaping company in his hometown. And he was like a hometown, homegrown. It was like a whole play on the words with the landscaping company. That money he makes from that, even though it may only be $1,000, $2,000, still impacts his financial aid and his taxable income in terms of how much I'm now eligible for. So we need to be mindful that if they were using or needing that income to kind of show profitability for Pell Grants or government loans, that this could then impact what that looks like. We also see an area of concern with international athletes. Now, at University of South Carolina, I can only talk about our experience, but we do not allow international athletes to sign NIL deals on our campus. And the general process there is that if you are not a US citizen, the deals probably shouldn't be going through. However, there's no legislation saying you can't do it. It's just ill-advised. However, what our offices does on our campus is set up deals for them overseas. And so they go through the process of saying, well, let's host a tennis camp in Germany then. Like, if you're gonna go back home for this summer, why don't we just go back home and do the camp there rather than doing it here? So still finding ways to navigate that, but it does look different. The biggest issue there is that as international individuals or international students, you have to be on a certain type of visa to be earning money. And that's where if you're on a student visa versus a work visa, how much money can you earn then? And then identity and authenticity. This is the part that I think I'm seeing this the most in individuals that I've interacted with, is that people that never once drank a coffee are now posting on Instagram ads pretending that I love coffee because I'm getting paid $1,000 for it to do so. I use that number just as a story or a moment. We have an athlete at our school that got asked to post 2 social media pictures on Instagram of them for a company, and they were going to be paid $4,000 to post 2 Instagram ads. And when I say ads, like legit, like a post. Take a picture with my product, put it on your Instagram. $4,000 for that. that should have you take a moment like, that's a lot of money to post a picture on social media. Think about how much you maybe post on your own. However, in that process, is a brand really representing who you are? We see things like threats to public scrutiny. Unfortunately, South Carolina lost on Sunday to UConn. If you saw anywhere on social media, everyone was like, Dawn Staley's the worst, we're off, everyone's terrible, this is the worst basketball team I've ever seen. They've lost 3 games. Like, they are not terrible, and Dawn Staley is by far not the worst coach ever. She may be the best. As part of that process, the public scrutiny, people feel I've invested money, I'm part of that collective, you have my money, you need to listen to me. And so a lot of times when we start to see how invested fans are, this is a negative impact for individuals, specifically through the social media landscape. We also see things like walk-ons and team cuts, areas or schools that may not be bringing in money through NIL, now considering to cut walk-ons that are maybe taking up space on the team or cutting the team completely at their school if they're not bringing any revenue for the school itself. As an athletic trainer, the change in focus. Athletes may not be there to make money or be there to play their sport and do this. They may be there to make money. And that's a change in the focus of how we are approaching patient care. Is their goal through our rehab to get them better? Do they want to do their rehab to play in the next game? Or are they doing this because they know they have to maintain their NIL deal, which means I need to play? Doesn't mean that they don't want to go back to playing, but is the goal for them playing now change for individuals? And lastly, family involvement. When I was talking to Abby, she shared an interesting story about how some families have been really supportive. However, some have had experiences where they've been, I supported you through high school, now you need to give back to me. An expectation that families are now giving this NIL money from the college kids' earnings back to their family that may be low income or feel like they have supported their child to get to this point, that they deserve the money. This is a very challenging environment for people to navigate, especially with mental health, this expectation to help others versus something that they feel they may have earned. So I went through some literature. I would say 2022 seemed to be like the spike of our NIL literature. And I pulled out some quotes here. This area is things like allowing high school athletes who are even younger than college athletes to earn NIL runs the risk of opening them up for more and longer pressures. However, on the flip side, this study done at University of New Hampshire found that indicate that student athletes who were engaged in NIL had not experienced more stress, but instead more motivation. The idea that they wanted to get more involved and get better, and they wanted to stay engaged. Got some conflicting data here to suggest like what is our best practice. There's only one study that really was in our sports medicine realm specific to NIL, and it's the quote in the middle. And it was really a place for us to, as a more of a call to action. It said we need to be prepared to address the possible health ramifications of our patients and their families, as well as provide help to navigate a more confusing and predatory landscape. Fostering strong relationships between stakeholders and the sports medicine staff is paramount to creating an environment that allows for honest discussions about NIL and the health of the athletes. I think that is a part that is encouraging for us as athletic trainers. But if we don't understand what NIL is or what it's not, these conversations are often one-sided, and we kind of get back to our root of, I don't know what's wrong, go talk to somebody, our recognize and refer pattern that we often saw when we started to see mental health emerging. I'm worried that this is going to turn into, I don't know, go talk to the NIL office, rather than saying, how can I best hear what's going on? What are your current struggles that you're experiencing? And how can I get you to the best person to talk to? In doing this, trying to talk to Joe at USC about learning a little bit more from his side, he also said, so you mean you have the athletes every day for treatment? I was like, yes, every day for treatment. As part of that, he's like, honestly, I need to know what y'all are seeing. Who are the agents coming into? How is this process? What are the athletes saying about their deals? Are they concerned about things? He's like, this has got to be more of a collaborative relationship for us to really create this, this area together. So as we think back to that transition piece, the areas in sport that we kind of talked about, injury, retirement seem to be some of the biggest ones. When a person has a season-ending injury, they're medically retiring from sport, or they are retiring because of, I don't plan to go on to the next level and play. Those are very different experiences when someone's told you can't play anymore versus I've now finished my college career and I'm done. The data suggests that people that have better support systems leading up to retirement, regardless if it's medical or aged out, if you will, those support systems were critical in a person identifying what's next for them. However, we see things like being cut, graduation, and potentially NIL to be areas where the increase for psychological concerns for individuals. As part of this, we need to figure out what do we do next? How do we develop a plan for individuals as they navigate these challenges? This is part of the NCAA best practice checklist, is actually to create these relationships. Now, as an athletic trainer, you may be saying, that seems like a lot to do. And I think this is where, as a team, finding ways for transfers, graduations, being cut needs to come from the athletics. But we as athletic trainers can be so helpful in the process of injuries, medically retiring, and how we can be advisable as a resource for individuals. So there's a really great study that came out in the sports psych literature that actually looked at NIL as a change event. What I mean by change event is that transition in life. And they gave this process of, as a person lands an NIL deal, we need to understand what is their perception of that deal. What do they think they just got? How are they now coping with that? Do they see it as pressure, stressful, exciting? When they're going through there, what's that process of change that they're now experiencing? And how do we offer to them decisions on how to best navigate this? So this was one area that kind of took you through some sessions that psychiatrist or psychologist and the athletic training staff worked together to partner to help individuals navigate this. And so looking at things about like, what were their values? How did they feel about the NIL deal? Was it linked when they saw perceptions of the deal? Was it linked to any other symptoms like avoidance, playing video games, not going to bed? So trying to figure out if like the sleep is tied to this, if how social media is tied to this. And so seeing NIL not always as good, but as a part that maybe adds to that kind of decision making. And so this is some efforts that we've been working on at USC, specifically on our athletic training side this past semester. So we did a quality improvement project with our men's and women's soccer team and our baseball team. And we asked all of the graduating seniors or individuals that were grad students that were finishing up, so all the ones that had a transition time coming in their sport. And we asked them about what things do you feel good about after you graduate, and what areas do you not feel as good about after you graduate? And we gave them some domains to kind of choose from. People felt really good about health and wellness. They felt like they knew how to cook their own meals. They felt like they knew how to go grocery shopping. The area that they didn't was finances, top to bottom. I don't know how to deal with money. I don't know how to do taxes. I don't know how this money works. Some of them had NIL deals and they were telling us, I don't know what it's going to look like when this goes away. I've now lived this lifestyle for these years I've had this, and now I don't know what life's going to look like after NIL because I'm most likely not going to go play pro. And so looking at these areas for individuals. And so we worked on a quality improvement project of trying to share additional resources and connect people with other avenues and things that can help navigate that financial literacy. And I seem to that to be a big area within sports medicine. I look back on my career when I worked NCAA Division I basketball. I set up every appointment possible. The athlete didn't have to think. You need a flu shot? Great, I got it set up for you. You want to go to the doctor? Hop on the van, I'll take you to the doctor. The process for a student athlete, especially at the collegiate level, you don't have to think. And for NIL, we're getting to the point that someone says, hey, you're good at sports, this company wants to pay you, let me do it for you, and now they just have this money. And so oftentimes they don't understand the impact or may have challenges understanding the impact of those things. So our school has taken kind of a two-prong approach to this. We have added exit physicals on wellness. And so looking at stuff, not just about like, do you have any injuries, but what does your wellness look like after you leave here? Do you need help understanding how to buy groceries? Do you want to meet with one of the dietitians before you graduate? Do you want to meet with someone from the financial office or someone to understand how to navigate these challenges? And we've also started a 4-year process called the Gamecock Student Athlete Development. So their freshman year, they go under what's called brand camp, like band camp. But brand camp is identifying how do you create your own personal brand and what is your image that you want to set for NIL or as a student athlete, who do you want to be? dress like a pro in their sophomore year. They take them to buy suits and dresses and blouses and stuff to actually go out and make public appearances. Networking night in their junior year, they connect them with individuals across the university, but specifically they connect them back to the people that actually gave them the money for NIL. So network with the people that have been paying all this money for you, because a lot of times they don't ever get to interact. They just do the product, they turn it over, and then they get the money. The hopeful goal there is meet these people so you can get a job. The goal of this is to find ways to make lasting relationships. And lastly, Spurs Up, which is Seniors Prepared, United, and Ready, as a culminating experience trying to put all the pieces together in terms of what's life look like after USC. Some of the biggest takeaways have been like this change in compensation or concepts of money, as I talked about people's kind of thought process about what it looks like. Leveraging during college, because it could be temporary. And so oftentimes the message has been, use this while you have it. Don't be afraid at NIL, and don't want to tell you not to take these deals, but you need to understand it's temporary and planning for things after. And so our approach here is then to explore athletic identity and that athlete identity for a person. If a person's whole image is football or swimming or whatever it may be, we need to understand who their self-concept and their self-worth is. So trying to a person understand their values, the things that make them who they are outside of sport is a key concept for us leading up to graduation. And I think this is a part as athletic trainers that we can do. As you talk to individuals, maybe try to stay away from calling them like my athletes and maybe referring to them as a patient. Small things that we can do to remove the idea of sport or that this is who they are. When we're creating patient goals, thinking about things that are like, what are your activities of daily living? How often do you want to engage with stuff outside of sport? Maybe our goal is not that you need to run a mile this week, but maybe you want to wear your high heels to the dance. Whatever that may be, that we create something that's maybe more patient-centered and patient-focused than sport-focused. And helping to, in so doing so, help remove that athlete identity. Identifying support systems. Sometimes these are coaches, sometimes these are parents, and then sometimes it is people that are just in their life. And so oftentimes I find and catch myself saying like, hey, do you want to call your mom? Or do you want us to get the coach involved? Rather than doing so, I think a best way to do that is, who are your support systems and how do you think that they would best be involved in this process? I think that process here then allows a person to pick and choose if they want them to be involved. Think back to Abby's story that she shared with me about the family wanting the money from their kids. That person may have a really good support system in their family, but not want to share the struggles or challenges with them because of that perceived issues. And then planning what's next. Sometimes planning for what's next causes anxiety. I was chatting with some of the AT students today, asking them what's next for yourself. That's anxiety inducing, just thinking about graduation, the BOC, leaving, and going to something new. But oftentimes starting that conversation early is the best chance we have of having a plan to think about what's next. And so starting to have those conversations with your student athletes as you navigate treatment or time with them is really helpful in terms of guiding that in that process. What does this mean for us? I don't know, and I'm going to be frank with you that I don't think we have any of this data to tell us what this is going to look like. I'm hopeful that this is going to be a positive outcome for athletic training, but I put some things up here that may have how you felt, or you maybe had somebody else make you feel. The one that comes up the most is these kids are making more than I do, and I'm here putting so much effort into them, and they're making bukus of money at this point. So that's a concern, right? You're taking care of people that are now making more money than you and in high school, potentially, or college. Consistency of athletes. I got into this profession because I like to talk to people. I like to build relationships. And when people come and go with the transfer portal and NIL, we don't get that time to really build those relationships with individuals like we may have in the past. I know when I was working clinically, you got a group of people and you kind of saw them through that whole time that they were there. I think that's one of the biggest perks of working at secondary schools is you get to see them, you get to see them grow up, become who they are, and then they go off to college. But for a lot of us in the college sector now, we see people for maybe a year or two, and then they may be off to something else that's maybe a little bit better or different for them. And so we're not being able to create those relationships as long with people. Then what is our sense of belonging? What is the thing that makes us want to come to work? If the things that have made us interested in our profession are now being changed, are we then turning into a place where it's almost like a physician's office where this person comes for a year and they're gone, and we see another person for a couple months and they're gone? And so what does our profession look like in the time of NIL itself? We also see equality in treatments. And so we can't be naive to say this isn't happening. If you have a $6 million Arch Manning coming in for treatment and their agents are there, guess who's probably getting treatment that day, right? However, is that the person that needs treatment the most? Or are now we being kind of pushed in a certain direction to make some decisions that challenge our morals, our values, our ethics in terms of how we're approaching patient care? Are we going to see people cutting sports based off revenue, which then potentially could impact our jobs? Do we see things that could go away, that maybe sports like equestrian that aren't yielding a big revenue generation, maybe being cut to then maybe support other things like football teams? And then as we start to do this, I think it's really important that the impact on us is we care as athletic trainers, as healthcare providers in general. And as part of that, we often want to initiate support and we want to create these relationships with people. However, we may not be the person that they're turning to or looking to all the time now. And in the past, we often are the person that they tell everything to, probably more than we want to know sometimes, but they tell you everything, right? They come in for a sprained ankle and you find out all of these other aspects of their day, the tests they took, this professor they don't like, what they're going to do that weekend. And that's the fun part of our job. You get to go see them win at the sport that they love and talk to them about the things that make them who they are. And that's a really unique aspect of athletic training. However, is this going to remove some of those pieces as we go about this when they're maybe more worried about a business deal than maybe creating those relationships with the people like us that they once had? So I'm going to leave you on these kind of what if thoughts or moments. What if NIL Collective supported athletic training? Now, would they? I don't know, but hear me out. What if this collective, the Billiken Club, we'll call it, I don't know if that's the actual name of it, but imagine this group of donors said, all right, Katie, I'll give you $200,000 if all of your AT students wear this gear. Right? They go out and do this, and the AT students are like, yeah, sure, we'll wear this shirt. I don't know anything else. And Katie's like, yeah, I'll take $200,000, right? But now they're promoting a business. They're maybe doing something that promotes their work. And the NIL Collective is still being able to partner with something that goes back to the athletic organization. What if money was paid to AT students for their time at clinical? For the AT students in the room, you're like, oh my God, yes, please. However, what if it started to look like that, right? So we're seeing as the move to the master's level, the debt to income ratio being an area of concern. However, salaries are improving, but the area that we don't see as a place to get better is they still have to go to clinicals while being a full-time master's students for that entire two years. Unlike similar models in PA or PT, where they have some didactics and some clinical years, our athletic training clinical and didactic time is at the same time. It's near impossible to have a job. And I've had students that have tried to navigate it. I tried to do it when I was in school. You get tired, right? And it's exhausting when you're like, do I want to pay for gas this week or do I want to go to clinicals? I've been there. What if we started to try to partner with athletic departments to say, you want these people here, you need them here, they need to be here, how can we best support them? One of our old coaches at USC went off to another job and they got a big bonus for winning a bowl game. And he used that bonus this past year to pay all of the GAs and support staff. None of that money went back to the athletic organization. So he divvied that all up and paid all of the graduate assistants that were there, spending their time over their break. That's really cool, good leadership and showing that we see you, we hear you, and you're here. What if brands and companies had ATs market their products? So as I was preparing this, I was like, what companies would reach out to us, right? Maybe McDavid, the people that make the braces and the sleeves. Maybe something like Johnson & Johnson, bigger companies that have a little bit more reach. But is Johnson & Johnson already a household name enough that they need to use us as ATs to do that? So where could we market or partner with companies that let me be the face of this? So I don't know if it's going to happen. Obviously, there's a lot of things that have to happen for deals to kind of go through. But think about, we have a team at our school that is typically good, and they all wear the same ankle brace. And the ankle brace company said, I want to use your athletes in some marketing ads showing them with the ankle brace on. So they're going to make all this money off of AT's company, this AT company now taking pictures of them wearing the ankle braces. So as we start to navigate those relationships, how can we as the athletic trainer start to market that? Hey, I need the products, I made new modalities, I need stuff at my job. How can I partner with y'all to then make some ways to navigate this together? So I think for this part, I'm gonna leave you these as what ifs. I don't have the answers to these. Don't ask me how it would actually physically really work, but I think we gotta start thinking creatively rather than being afraid of NIL, that, all right, it's here. Let's figure out how we can use it best rather than saying, let's not do it, or let's hopefully it goes away, or the landscape's gonna change. I think what we gotta do is figure out how to embrace it and move forward with it in that process. So list of our references here that if you would like to go back, most of these are on mental health or the NIL kind of landscape or where some of those quotes came from. But this is in the slide deck for y'all to access as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman. We'll now move into the panel portion of our program, which will include an opportunity for question and answer. So panelists, if you wouldn't mind making your way down to the stage. The panel session will be moderated by our Coordinator of Clinical Education, Dr. Tim Howell. And I'm also going to invite Caroline Donlinger and Mary Gogola from ITA to introduce our panelists to you.
I'd like to begin by introducing Erica Charlo. Erica is a licensed professional counselor in the University Counseling Center at St. Louis University. Currently, Erica is embedded in the athletics department and provides individual psychotherapy and overall well-being support for student athletes. She earned her bachelor's degree from Boston College and her master's degree in counseling from Northern Illinois University. Erica has worked in higher education for over 17 years in the areas of nursing student success and retention, athletics, and counseling at both 4-year and 2-year institutions. She's presented at both local and national conferences in the areas of nursing student success, and more recently, the impact on student athlete well-being through integration and collaboration. Next, I'd like to introduce Elena Melillo. Elena's tenure as assistant athletic trainer at St. Louis University began in July 2018. Melillo is the athletic trainer for the Billikens women's soccer and track and field teams. She's also previously worked with the Billikens volleyball, softball, and swimming and diving teams. Melillo served 2 years as a graduate assistant athletic trainer at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, working with the volleyball and softball teams. She earned a Master's of Arts degree in higher education at UMKC in 2018, and she's a 2016 graduate of the University of Missouri with a Bachelor of Health Science degree in athletic training. Melillo is a St. Louis native and graduate of Rosati Kane High School.
Lastly, I would like to introduce Becky Stegen. Becky Stegen has been an athletic trainer at Afton High School since 2009. For the majority of her career, Ms. Stegen has been at the secondary school level, but she also has experience at the collegiate level. Ms. Stegen enjoys the unique challenges of the secondary school atmosphere where every day is different and she can be involved with a variety of sports. Moving from private to public school has opened her eyes to the mental health needs of secondary school student athletes. Ms. Stegen is passionate about making sure her patients are heard, they feel safe, and know that she is on their side.
Panelists, it is absolutely amazing to sit next to you because in some capacity I've worked with all of you, and I just feel very fortunate to be sharing this venue with you. So Zach, thanks for the great presentation. And now I'm very curious about some things. So Elena, I'm going to start with you because very recently you actually shared with me the SLU mental health protocol, which I think addresses quite nicely a lot of the things that Zach mentioned in his presentation. Can you kind of talk about that in terms of what's actually happening here at SLU, please?
Got it. First time speaker, Well, so that's actually a protocol Erica and I put together this year. But we also found when going over our best practices act that we were lacking kind of a formal written policy. So we try to focus on a couple different areas: a student who was actively in crisis, a student who just needed kind of a referral and what our referral process is, and then also a student who was traveling on the road and what that looks like if they're in crisis.
Thank you for sharing that. So Erica, I've had the opportunity to teach a mental health first aid class with you. Can you talk about kind of your involvement with mental health first aid training here on campus and kind of what was the impetus to get you involved with that?
Sure. So when I started at the University Counseling Center, I had heard that they had wanted one of the therapists at the UCC to also be teaching mental health first aid. And so I had volunteered to do it. So I went through the training. And now that I'm trained, it's like I've been able to train specifically coaches and staff within athletics, which has been, I think, good for a lot of reasons. Like it helps me build more relationships with them in a different setting, and also having real conversations about mental health with them in an environment where they get to hear my perspective on it as the embedded therapist in the department, but then also them getting to talk to me about their experiences, their concerns. And then I also teach with you. We teach different student groups across campus, as well as I teach other faculty groups. So it's been a good experience just to, as a therapist, kind of bringing my perspective through my lens of like what is important and what I want people to walk away with, that I think is important, of just like keeping your eyes open and being aware of what students might be needing and recognizing those signs.
Thank you for that. And one of the words that keeps coming up over and over and over throughout the presentation and the panel discussion so far is just relationships. And the students in the room will attest the fact that I always refer to athletic training as a relationship business. It's about being the right person at the right time and really just having those opportunities and really, surrounding yourself with a great network of people. So Becky, as a high school athletic trainer, where resources are a little bit different, how are issues like mental health addressed in your landscape?
Oofda, that's all I gotta say. Right, well, we don't have any, well, we found out recently, we need to have a better program in place, a system. And, but, it's mostly what I see, I have to bring up the chain, have to bring to my AD or to the principal. But it's been very scattered. Our experience, for the past year, we've been working on this about, we had an incident that's making us do it better and to make it better. So as far as specifics, it's been chaos, but we're getting there. So that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
As expected, it's just different. I mean,
It's
without
very
resources, it's a challenge, so I think the big piece is, so Zach, this is back to you, is in terms of, you have student well-being and success. And what's great about a college campus or high school athletes is that they are student athletes. So they are people first, and there's this thing that they like to do. So how do we get to balance the thing that they like to do and being a person?
I think the balance is where we struggle in athletic training too, this idea of work-life balance is that to me, it's one of my mentors described this as the biggest unicorn that you have ever seen run around, which you've probably never seen then, right? Like work-life balance is never going to be a thing that we accomplish the same way. I don't think student athletes are going to be able to accomplish that balance. However, integrating and figuring out how you can see this as an area that I need to put more time in now versus later, or I need to focus a little bit more on my work versus my fun time here. That's a student's got to see how that can ebb and flow, and it's not going to be a 50-50 split. And I think that's the best thing we can do is try to help people understand that student athlete doesn't mean 50% student, 50% athlete. The same way as athletic trainers, when we talk about work-life balance, it's not 50% work, 50% balance. Like that doesn't pay the bills. And so with that piece there too for student athletes is helping them to, I guess, come up with their concept of what reality and balance looks like to them, and then finding ways that when they do stuff outside of sport that helps them be better, if they're seeing that as part of their sport or part of their balance. So give you a good example. Some of our student athletes have been doing yoga, and as part of that, do they see yoga as part of sport time or part of like recovery and mindfulness time? And that is a really interesting conversation when we talk to them. Like, I have to do this because I'm an athlete, or I'm doing this to work on my mental wellness.
So recognition, I think, is a big part of mental health in terms of being individuals to recognize that someone may need something. Maybe they're in a challenge, hopefully not in a crisis, but there's a recognition that they need something. But I also think sometimes people need to be a better advocate for themselves. I think, again, that kind of goes back to a relationship. So what advice would you have for the people listening today and in attendance to better advocate for their own mental health needs? Anybody?
Boundaries. Time boundaries. Maybe windows of time where you can come for treatments, or at windows of time when my cell phone's on, windows of time, especially when it's off, so boundaries, bottom line.
Is this for anybody who's listening?
Anybody? Your perspective, please.
I think, you talked about, Dr. Winkelman, you talked about like having your support system. And I think in reference to student athletes, but I think for anybody, like knowing who your support people are, like your support people, who are your people at work, who are your people at home or in your community that you lean on, and making sure that you lean on them when you need them and that you're reaching out when you need them. Because I think that that's so important, because therapy is so important, right? I'm a therapist, but also like if you think about it as like the collective, and not every culture community is necessarily going to reach out to therapy as a resource. So finding like what works for you, and as long as you're using that and leaning into that when you need it is really important.
And yeah, also just going off of that, taking care of yourself is so important. And you can't take care of other people unless you're coming from a place that you're healthy enough to give advice on that. So I always just think of like, people always say I'm a really positive person, but I take care of myself so that I'm able to be positive when I'm in a workplace setting. And I know that people are always, like my students are always watching me, and that if I am giving such a negative reflection, then you know what I mean, they're going to feed off of that as well. So just making sure you take care of yourself and you're setting those boundaries. Because again, it's just a reflection of you, but then that's what your students also feed into.
Pass it all the way down to, I think the saying, it's okay to not be okay, gets passed around a lot with mental health, but I think we need to add on to that sentence, as long as you get help or do something about it. So like, it's okay to not be okay. It really is, but you gotta do something. Like, speak to someone, find resources, figure out what the thing that's you're not okay about, so you can actually address it. So I think that first part is finding some time to like recognize in yourself that maybe I'm not at my best and I need to figure out what's next. The next piece is look at your insurance. If you have the privilege to have it, figure out what resources you can have. Mental health is expensive. Counseling's a little pricey, but see what stuff is out there, or what free resources your like HR offers for employees, or what things maybe like a counseling service center or from your campus community offers. Those are things I think people sometimes like, oh, I didn't know this was here the whole time I went to school here. And so I think those are big areas too to kind of start navigating, is figuring out what that looks like. And then lastly, my thing is like, the first counselor or therapist you have doesn't have to be your only one. Like, just like you maybe went to a restaurant the first time and you just didn't really enjoy it, it's okay to go back again. But after some point, maybe you're like, maybe I should try a different restaurant. That's okay. Same thing with mental health. Like, maybe you and your counselor didn't vibe as well, and there's another person that can meet your needs. And finding, I think, somebody that looks like you or has the same background as you is really helpful. So finding something that you have a connection with a therapist is, I think, a really good way. That it doesn't have to be like, I got referred to this one, so this is my only person I have, and finding a person that kind of fits what your needs are.
So in the spirit of that, I think often as people, we're just kind of put in that position of there are things that we have to do, there's things that we want to do, and there's things that we need to do. And, in the spirit of mental health, the fact that on campus, if a student needs to see a professional, Erica, you're the go-to person because you're embedded. So some people are coming to you from a lot of different places. Can you kind of talk about, like, if a first-time person is getting into counseling, what that's like for them?
Sure. I tell my students all the time, anytime I talk to a team, that so I grew up in a family where there wasn't a lot of discussion around mental health. And so I'm always very upfront and honest about that. And then I became a therapist. But I really kind of honor and respect the space, which is my office, and that somebody walking into that space, they might be the first person ever in their family to walk into a therapy space, and like the importance of that, and really just being so careful and so respectful of that, and so appreciative that somebody's willing to take that, because that's a big, bold step in some cases for somebody to do that. And so recognizing that, and then kind of approaching it from, I use so many different modalities in my office. Sometimes we're doing art, and sometimes we're processing trauma, and sometimes we're listening to a guided meditation, but really trying to figure out like who this human being is in front of me, like aside from sport in some situations, and like what are they needing in that moment. And then also, referring, if, like you said, if I'm not the best fit for somebody, like who might be the best fit for them. We have a whole team in our university counseling center. And so then also looking at that, and then also looking at, like, we have so many groups on campus that we offer through the university counseling center. And so looking at, like, could one of those groups be a really good fit for that student?
So Elena, because your office is, on the main floor of Chaffetz, I'm confident that you've actually had athletes that you've recommended go talk to Erica. How does that conversation go in terms of just understanding there's a lot of stigma that surrounds mental health? And, if anybody's gone through mental health first aid, they realize that's a huge part of it's a barrier that separates people from the care that they need, is just the stigma. So I'm curious, in terms of any resistance that you've had, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on that athlete. Some athletes will want me to directly reach out to Erica and say, hey, can you just schedule it for me? Kind of like our basketball friends you were talking about. I'll have some athletes that just want me to put on them on the email to Erica. I have some that will give me email. Patient. But then I think it's also key to make sure, if you do give them, like, put it in their court, you follow up with them. Say, oh, I'll take it. Whatever barrier that was, if they didn't send it, that we overcome it, or we help them get to a place where they feel comfortable reaching out to Erica. Or again, maybe that's a different, person at the UCC we need to go see, or again, identifying issue list.
Absolutely, 100%. If we're talking about medical conditions, the clinical answers, it always depends. So I appreciate that very much. So I want to just take a moment to pause. Does anybody in the audience have a question that they'd like to pose? Or I can just keep going down my list. Okay, challenge accepted. So because we realize that everybody's different, and I'm going to kind of go back to the mental health first aid piece. And for those of you that have gone through it, you understand that the very first piece of that is just to approach. So really, approach is just to have a conversation with the person about how things are going. And because it's relationship based, the second ledger of the entire algorithm is L's, just to listen non-judgmentally. So if you think about when someone comes to talk to you, what are some of the things that panelists, wide open to you all, what are some of those things that you are either looking for or listening for when you talk to them about how things are going, that are going to identify either a challenge or crisis?
I think this is probably one of the hardest parts of the whole conversation is not the identifying, but getting yourself to ask those questions. Brief story. I think when I've had people, either patients or students that you've developed these relationships with, you know them so well that you don't almost want something to be wrong with them. And I think from like our AT aspect, that's a really hard place to navigate when you need to ask someone like, are you having thoughts of killing yourself? And that's a really hard question to ask someone when you're like, please say no, please say no. And that whole time in your head, you're like, I'm seeing all the red flags and the signs, but I really don't want this person to be struggling. So I just want to like, just note that to people, like when we talk about these things, it may seem like, oh yeah, just ask them these questions. It's hard to do so, but I think some of the warning signs are, to me, retreat or removal from things that they used to like to do or not, or engaging. So people that are like missing practices or not showing up with their friends the same way, maybe seeming down or depressed. A lot of it's like verbal cues for me, things that people have said like, oh, it'll be easier when I'm not around. And I'm like, what did you mean by that? And so oftentimes I respond with, what did you mean? And that's my go-to response, to allow a person to explain them. What did I hear you correctly? Not, don't talk like that. That's not okay. Cause I don't want to shut down that conversation to continuing on. So trying to open up that door to kind of explore those.
I'm like very much an observer. So when I have time in my schedule, I try to go to practice because I just like to be there, and I think it helps build rapport. But also just watching like what's going on, who's interacting with who. And then one-on-one, like I'm always watching body movements and like closed positioning and open positioning and like speech. Is it fast? Is it slow? What are they talking about? What are they not telling me? So there's so many things that I'm picking up on that that I'm noticing, and maybe it's just because I spend so much one-on-one time in my office space with that, but just very small things. How somebody's sitting, how they walked into my office, how tense their body is. So lots of different, really, I think, small things that I'm always trying to pay attention to.
I just want to reiterate a point that Zach made that I thought was really good. And I learned this when we have been educating a lot of our coaches with the mental health first aid classes, but I've noticed a lot of the coaches have come up to me and said, oh man, I've never knew it was okay to ask somebody if they had a plan to commit suicide, because again, they think people are just afraid to ask it, that they don't ever ask it. And again, it's such an important question. If you think someone is in crisis and they come into your office to ask. So yeah, I think that's a big one that people always forget to, well, not maybe forget, but are afraid to ask.
They're bringing the mic over.
Mine will be very quick. One of the things that in our profession, we're around a lot of people and we watch a lot of interactions. And sometimes those people that are their support structures, you might have concerns that they're actually being very supportive. How do you manage that? You kind of see, I love what you said, Erica, about going to practice and just watching. I love just watching those interactions. And I'm sure you see a lot of this, Becky, too, at the high school level. Those people that are in some of these athletes' lives may not have their best interests in mind, and they're stuck with them and their support structure. How do you manage that?
I think always maintaining confidentiality for me with the student is, again, it just comes back to providing the space in my office that they feel comfortable, where they trust me enough to tell me everything that's going on with them. But yeah, it's a hard area to navigate. And so for me, it's really just pouring into the student in the sense of like providing as much space and time as I can for them to process what they're going through, and trying to figure out when do I guide them to a different step if they want to do that. But again, it's just like for me, it's just providing as much safety and space in my office as I can for them to feel comfortable to keep coming back. Like the retention of students coming back to my office is important to me because I think that then that gives them, you know, time when they're ready to talk more about that if it's happening.
So I'm gonna let you pick it up again anyway. So as we think about how mental health first aid was done on SLU's campus with athletics, can you kind of talk about, because I was part of some conversations about how that was put together, but I never know quite how it's turned out. So in terms of, was it mostly head coaches? Was it support staff? Because I realized that I'm gonna just call it the separation of power is important sometimes in athletics. So can you kind of talk about the
That's such a
structure of that?
great question. No, we did not just solely focus on head coaches. We actually targeted all of our coaches. I thought it was really important to educate our grad assistants. I feel like their age, they hang out with the athletes a lot, you know, and some of our grad assistants live over at Grand Forest, which is an apartment building on campus. So again, like their interactions with the students are going to be greater than mine, even greater than their coaches. So I thought they were a valuable group to educate, and just another group of like young people who probably don't know specific questions or what to identify when they have people coming to them with concerns.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Becky, you first. So Becky, can you talk about the process and or people you are working with developing a policy at the high school? What advice would you give students going into the secondary setting to look for, or how to work on starting to develop a policy?
Oof. First of all, you have to get everybody to realize that there's a problem. And before it slaps you in the face. So, but what we're doing is talking with our school counselors, our administration, our superintendent, our assistant superintendent, and our activities director, and examining the failures of what we've had in the past. And from there, we're implementing new, what's the word here? A new pathway, mental health pathway. So it's slow. It's not going to happen right away. But we're talking about it regularly, you know, and, you know, we've got some new policies about passes out of school. We've got little bits at a time, and it's making an impact. You can tell the difference from the kids already. It's hard to explain because there's not a specific incident going on, but there's a sense of the school seems more calm, more organized now. I think because things are out in the open and we're talking about it and asking the kids, what can we do better for you? And so start with talking, you know, work up the chain, start talking with your direct supervisor, your athletic director, activities director, and sit down and don't be afraid to ask them the hard question too, the what ifs. You know, we don't want the what ifs to happen, you know, and so put every scenario on the table when you're talking about it, because the what ifs happen sometimes. So that's about it.
Thank you. Okay, can I ask the next question? Thanks. Okay. So for all panelists, what is your advice when returning student athletes to the, sorry, I messed it up. What is your advice when returning student athletes to team activities after a mental health incident occurs? What does that look like when shaping your mental health policies?
Yeah, I can start with that one. Again, I think that's leaning on your resource team. I think part of that depends on what kind of mental health concern they're coming back from. Typically, our team physician may give us some guidelines around that. And then also maybe asking that student, or even like if you have a relationship with their counselor on what triggers them, and if there's things at practice that could be really triggering for them and spark another crisis. And then also just talking to that student on how they feel about coming back. Do they want us to address it? Do they just want to be thrown back into normalness? You know what I mean? So yeah, that would be my advice.
I think another part to that is to think about based off like what kind of crisis or what kind of care they received. I think from the aspect with my kind of background and training with treatment for suicide and suicidal ideation, like if a person's been to the hospital and they're being released from the hospital and then going to like IOPs, like inpatient, outpatient, like it looks very different. So a person, for example, I had an individual that was in inpatient treatment from 8 to 12 every day after getting out of the hospital, but then had afternoons free. And so they would show up every afternoon to practice and everyone was like, hey, welcome back. And they didn't realize where they were every morning, but they missed film, they missed some stuff in the mornings because they were in therapy at that time. And so I think based off that return to play process has to be that support piece that at that kind of like 60-day window after a mental health crisis is our biggest area of concern. And we have to be navigating that through a piece of continued support and guidance and not just a, hey, you're better. And that this is a journey rather than a checkbox for an individual. And so figuring out what those things are, those triggers, those areas, but also the things that are working, figuring out the stuff that's going well on the team. And I think with the people that have been in hospitalization for mental health, we've also seen it where it's like everyone's afraid to say something. And if an individual has been discharged, they are in a place that they can reintegrate back. And so we got to figure out what that piece looks like. And I think doing a cookie cutter approach is really difficult to do for mental health, that this needs to be individualized versus like an ACL return to play. Like, all right, this is our typical routine. We get to this month, we can do this. Like, it's not always gonna be the case when we're navigating some challenges with mental health.
Thank you, all of you, for your time and expertise. And just some of the things that you just mentioned when you've navigated a case with a patient who has had a crisis or an incident, and it's the chance for then you to recover. And you had mentioned, Dr. Winkleman, about using your resources, whether it's HR or your support system. And I don't know, in your research, how many people had used AT's care? Because that came up in response to AT's managing a lot of stress. And so whether it's AT's care or HR or another support system that you might have through work, if you could give all of us some advice down that path.
Yeah, so for AT's Care, for anybody that's unfamiliar, it's a peer-to-peer support hotline that anybody that goes through a personal or patient experienced traumatic experience, and trauma is self-defined by you. That could be something like a natural disaster to a mental health case that you either went through yourself or you had a patient that went through it. So you can call into the hotline and you're paired up with somebody in your region. So I'm our District 3 representative, one of the people on the care team for AT's Care. So could talk to me. But from that process in our study that we did, so we identified from the time that the 2016 document was released till the study when we finished in 2023, there were 62 college student athletes that had died by suicide in that time, from the time of that release. So we didn't go all the way back, but then we tried to find the AT that was there at that time. From there, we found 55 or so of them, and we interviewed 12 of them. And from those 12, no one sought formal therapy from the 12 we talked to. However, some did call into AT's Care. AT's Care is not therapy, though. It is a crisis peer support. So it's meant to, what are you working through? How do we navigate it? And now let's get you on to the next person or piece to talk to. And I think AT's Care has got this idea that it's going to be that place for everyone. Interestingly, in these conversations, we also identified, which wasn't part of the research study, so it's not in the publication, but a lot of people were like, well, I'm not an ATA member, so I can't use it. Or I was a student, so I didn't call. And that's not the case. Like anybody can call in. So if you are or you're not a member of an ATA, you can still call into AT's Care, which just a plug for that. I'm not getting paid anything for saying that. It's just a resource that's out there. So you can also encourage somebody else. So like whenever I see on the news a student athlete death, I try to Google the athletic trainer from that school or place. And then I put in their information to AT's Care, and then AT's Care will reach out to them and say, hey, someone's concerned about you. That's a great way, even if you don't call in or someone you know, you can still connect them with a resource to get somebody to chat with them. I do think it works. The fire industry uses this often, like peer-to-peer crisis support, where they pair people up after a fire call, and it's been working in that area. But I do think it's a place for people to talk to other people that get the field, but it's not licensed mental health services, and I think that's the key differentiation there.
Hi, I have two more. Okay, so the first one, how would you approach starting the discussion regarding mental health for international students or students with various backgrounds, language barriers, and cultural differences in views of mental health? That's for everyone.
That's a really good question. It's such an important group to just pay attention to, because there's so many different things that could be going on. Distance from home, distance from their support systems, if there's any language barriers there. For me, again, it's kind of like why I go to practice and why I try to just be more present when my time allows, but also just trying to again, and I always come back to this, so I've said it 100 times, but like just like providing that space so that students feel comfortable when they come in. And I talk about my identity when students come into my office, and so I think identity is important, and so we talk about that in my space and like what we bring into the therapy space and how that impacts the therapy that we do. But that's how I approach it. I think building, I actually run through the University Counseling Center. And I've had athletes attend this, but I run a group to address the loneliness epidemic on campuses. And so it's called Dinner with Friends You Haven't Met Yet. And we have a large number of international students that come to it. And it's just a great time. Like we sit down, we eat dinner together, like in community, and just have like really fun conversation. But that's created so many different connections and networks with those students, and then they're branching out and talking to their friends and their classes and telling them about different resources in the counseling center. So it's just providing space for me and different resources and opportunities to reach out to those students.
Also, just going off of that, this was a small initiative that we started this year, but we do multicultural Mondays once a month in our dining center over at Chaffetz Arena. And we focus on a different culture of a different international student within our program. And we really try to highlight the cuisine of that person. And so again, it's a great way for them to feel welcome and feel a little bit at home, but then it's also a great way for our non-international students to kind of branch out and see what other different cultures are like and food is like, and really get a conversation going around that.
I'll take the last question, Jada.
Last one. Active listening is often mentioned with regard to supporting someone's mental health. How can one become an effective active listener?
I think the biggest part is to practice it. It sounds ironic, right? The practice of listening, but to listen, to actually hear what a person is saying to you and not respond immediately to what the next question is or moving on with the response already. So sometimes we need to actually hear what the person said, take a moment to reflect or pause, say thank you for sharing, things like that to validate a person's experience, that what they're sharing is deep or maybe difficult to do. And I think practicing that takes time and energy. So if this wouldn't be a talk that I give if I couldn't plug Standardized Patients, but I'm gonna plug Standardized Patients really quick. Like practicing this in a safe space is the best place to do it. And I think those are the things that I've seen my students grow the most in mental health is like the first time you ask a person difficult questions around their mental health shouldn't be with an actual patient. It should be in a safe environment, in a learning environment that I can see that I didn't listen. And you should videotape those and go back and watch yourself, listen how you responded, watch your body language. Did you pick up on cues or things that the person was doing? And so active listening is truly a process that allows a person to share their story, but you have to be reflective in how you're responding to them. So that'd be my 2 cents.
All right, please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists. And thank you, Dr. Howell, for moderating. Well done. In addition to our thanks for our speakers today, I'd like to thank the many people that have helped make this evening possible. So thank you to Iota Tau Alpha and the wonderful leadership team for their assistance in planning this event. Thank you to the St. Louis Society of Athletic Training for sponsoring this event. Thank you to the many sponsors and donors that make our athletic training scholarships possible. Thank you to Ms. Jada Hubert and Hannah Myers from the Dean's Office of Marketing, Communications, and Recruitment for their administrative assistance and support and keeping track of Dr. Winkleman on the stage with the video camera. And thank you to all of you, the students, faculty, staff, preceptors, and friends of the SLU Athletic Training Program. We're very grateful to share in this community with you. And one way in which we plan to celebrate that in the upcoming National Athletic Training Month is with a recognition of athletic trainers at an upcoming home men's basketball game. So if you would like to join us on Saturday, March 1st at 3 p.m. For a pregame recognition of athletic training staff, students, and preceptors in our community, please send me an email, let me know, and I'll give you more information about that. And one last time, if you have not yet registered your attendance for this event, please do so. Everyone, please document your attendance. And then if you would like to receive CEUs for attending this event, you'll have additional questions to fill out. You can expect to receive a post-event survey within 24 hours that will then trigger the distribution of your CEU certificate. So thank you again. I will leave you with the registration link and the donation links for our Brandy Burgett Memorial Award and Scholarship fundraiser coming up. So please do take a look to try and join us for that, or at least contribute to our goal of endowing that scholarship. Thank you again for attending, and enjoy the rest of your evening.